where we serve you delightful, slightly intense, but definitely worthwhile conversations. A podcast focused on bringing people together by drinking, listening, and conversing. So grab your favorite drink and let's see what's on today's menu. All right, people, welcome to Peach Creek, the cafe. It has been a moment, and quite frankly, it has been a moment since it is only me. Oh my God, I don't know the last time I actually just sat behind and talked, but there are some things that I want to talk about. And yeah, I decided that I was going to do it by myself because Denise didn't want to do the research. No, let me stop playing. Schedule conflicts. But anyhow, I'm your host, Sean, and today you are stepping into episode 89. Episode 89 is Protecting the Students, or the Wild, Wild West. All right, you know, here at the cafe, we always have a conversation centered around a drink. And what am I drinking on today? Something a little different. I am actually drinking on some Malbec in this cup here. Boom, boom, boom. Yeah, it is some Malbec wine, red wine. Now, some of you wine aficionados out there are going to be pissed off at me because I actually chilled my red wine because I like my wine chilled. Sometimes I put ice in it. I know, a little ghetto, but whatever. And of course, I am drinking on my big bottle of water. Boom, boom, boom. Look at that. Look at all those stickers. Boom, boom, boom. Yeah, and good God, look at this. Match the hat, match the shirt. Boom. Look at that. I am in the money. All right. I'm going to try to have as much of an unbiased opinion about some of the things that I'm going to talk about. And as some of you may have noticed, the title, Protecting the Students of the Wild Wild West. Obviously, I'm talking about something dealing with the classrooms and primarily guns. But before we do that, I just want to highlight, I am a parent, right? Now my son is in college. I'm an empty nester. He's no longer here. But, you know, we still communicate every day. He lives with his mom in Virginia Beach. But, you know, ultimately, when he was in elementary, we was in middle school and high school, right? As a parent, you send your child to school, and the least of your worries should be whether or not your child is going to be safe, right? Certainly, there's always the aspect of maybe somebody is going to bully him, maybe there's going to be conversations or communications about things. Those things are normal, typical growth mechanisms, I think, for students, but you normally don't think about them succumbing or being the victim of any kind of violence, right? And likewise, I think, and I'm not a teacher, I never taught, never substitute, never wanted to, although I want to be a professor, but that's a different story. But when teachers walk into the classroom, the least of their worries should be, in fact, whether or not students are safe or will be subjected to violence, guns or otherwise, in the classroom, right? And what we do know is that violence in schools can occur as internal threats as well as external threats. And unfortunately, it's just the nature of the beast. Over the last few years, there have been a number of school shootings, and it just has become a sad reality of kind of how we operate in this arena at this particular time. And so this episode will explore one state's recent mechanism of trying to deal with that, and that is Tennessee. But before we get there, I wanted to try to do something with a little bit of statistics. I wanted to kind of highlight some of the things that is the sad reality. So since 2000, we're in 2024, of course. So since 2000, there have been approximately 538 school shootings. That's from elementary to college. There is a link here where you can actually go through and look and see since 2000 kind of where all of these different school shootings have occurred. And again, these are not just external threats. These are internal threats. These are not just adults. These are also students who have guns who turn against other students and staff. This is also staff members who may be doing the same thing with respect to gun violence. But when I did this episode and started doing the research on it, I was really taken aback, really, about the number. Because the reality is that I think we get lost in the moment. We get lost in the sauce of things. And so I'm going to put this up here, but you get lost in here. But since 2000, 538, and it goes through, it takes a lot of time going through this, but you can see they are listing what date it occurred, what city, what state, the number of casualties, the number of injuries, and a little description of what occurred, right? And this goes from 2000 up into, let me go to the last. It's a lot of scrolling. Look at that. Look at that. Just utterly ridiculous, right? Utterly ridiculous. You think you go to the school grounds to learn, but unfortunately, for whatever reason, people have determined that they do not want to do that, or they have determined that they want to disrupt that. And this is up until the last date. And the last date was April the 24th, 2024. And that was in Arlington, Texas, with one dead. And that was an 18-year-old at Bowie High School. The student was shot and killed on campus. Another student was arrested for the shooting, right? So that goes through an exhaustive list. And if you really want to go and kind of assess kind of what was going on, if you the type of person who like to take an idea and try to see kind of how do you group them, are there similarities, are there specific things that's going on, you certainly can go to the website to do that. And when I was doing this, I remember vividly, it was in 2007. I was a student body president at Old Dominion University. And I remember at a time where our school kind of went on lockdown. And the school went on lockdown because it was unknown what was going on. We didn't know if there were attacks on multiple campuses or not. But this was in regards to the Virginia Tech incident. And I'm actually going to go there just to pull that up. And that was, yeah, it's weird too, now that I'm sitting here thinking about it. It occurred on April the 16th, 2007, which happened to be 2 days after my birthday, for those of you who really care. But this was a 23-year-old student, Sung Hyun Cho, and I can't pronounce his name. He was armed with two pistols, a Glock 19, Walther P22. He killed 32 students and faculty members at Virginia Tech and wounded another 17 students and faculty members in two separate attacks before taking his own life. And the first attack was on the second floor of Johnston Hall, for those of you who know what that is. I've been to Virginia Tech mainly because of my fraternity to party and to do other things, but not really to like walk around and see. And then he changed his clothes. He recorded multiple videos stating that he had to do this for his brothers and sisters, unsure what that really meant. He also shot 17 more students and staff members and then began wounding them. And during the rampage, he wore a black t-shirt, a russet vest, and a backwards baseball cap. But this is my signature look here, backwards baseball caps. And during the rampage, he had black boots and grip gloves, and it was the third deadliest mass shooting by a lone gunman after the Orlando nightclub shooting in 2007 and the Las Vegas shooting. And I remember that we had meetings. Just the president of the university called all the folks together, including me and other folks who were student leaders, just tried to get an idea and a handle of how to communicate effectively to the individuals in the community that we serve, right? The students that we serve, because a lot of them have brothers and sisters, cousins, family members, friends who actually were at Virginia Tech at the time, and there was some concern about whether or not individuals that they knew were harmed or had come in contact with the individual. And I remember I had to give kind of this speech to students, and it was a daunting task, right? Because first of all, I didn't know whether or not this was specific only to that university, but secondary to that, I needed to make sure I knew what to say, right? What comforting words can you say to individuals who are dealing with an aspect of uncertainty at that particular time, but also a heightened level of fear, right? And so I did what only I could do, and that's communicate to them from my heart. And it just was an unfortunate situation, and it caused a lot of alert, right? But time passed, right? And then people forget these things. And then when another incident comes, then we go back, news begin to bring up old things about what happened before. But the reality is that the families who were impacted by that, they never would be able to get through that, right? Every day, I'm assuming every day that there is some kind of aspect of remembrance of that particular situation, and it's just unfortunate. And so in this particular aspect of it, there's always been this kind of discussion about what should be done, right? How do you combat the issue of gun violence in schools? Not gun violence overall, like that's a larger topic, right? But I want to just talk about, for this particular episode, the subset of dealing with schools from K to 12 and colleges. So some of you may be listening to this and say, you can't deal with one subset if you don't deal with the greater issue. That very well may be, but that is for our elected officials to get their shit together and figure out the best way to deal with that. But, for purposes of this episode, there's been discussions about gun reform, whatever that means, however that look, whether that is individual states doing gun reform or the federal government attempting to do gun reform. In fact, when some of these incidents occurred, there were executive orders, for instance, from Obama and other presidents that attempted to put a dent in one's ability to get guns. I think there was some kind of executive order that dealt with the reselling of guns at travel shows. I forgot what they're really called, but basically where you can just walk in like a flea market and buy a gun. You don't have to go through any process of searching and things of that nature or having any background checks. So there were some things that were done in direct response to some of these violent acts, particularly on the school grounds. Other folks talked about whether or not you should just put metal detectors in schools. And so the reality is, I think I want to stop on that one for a moment. The reality is that that particular aspect, I think, normally carries a negative connotation because a lot of times the metal detectors are in urban schools and not necessarily in the neighboring suburban schools. And so there's a negative connotation with that respect that only certain types of individuals or certain categories of individuals or certain subgroups of individuals who happen to go to inner city schools are ones who are more prone to engage in gun violence. And we know that just simply isn't true. And, I don't know if that's the right thing. And other aspects of it is more police at schools and on campuses. But the problem with that is that that's a strain on resources. I think most individuals will argue that it's a strain on resources because from some individuals' perspective, and I think a lot of localities, right, that have to deal with the budgets, whether that's in a city, whether that's in a town. But there's always budgetary constraints. There's always issues with how do you deal with having police available at a school all day when there's other issues in the community that they also need to deal with. So there's always the juggling of that, right? And I think that for me, I think that it require localities to really think about their budgets, how they manage them, and some localities deal with it by not having police there, but what they call SROs, which I think is security resource officers, who oftentimes are former law enforcement individuals, or they are in law enforcement, but this is kind of their secondary job or their part-time job where they are in the schoolhouses and things of that nature as a deterrent and or to deal with situations that could potentially go to violence. But the reality is that some states have taken the other approach of placing the responsibility, and I don't want to use the word responsibility, but allowing certain individuals within the school to kind of take on and bear arms and things of that nature. And we'll talk a little bit about that because Tennessee is not the only state. There's actually a lot of states that in some form or fashion permit individuals who are employed by the school system to actually carry concealed weapons, concealed guns. And I'll go through the list. And I'm telling you right now, I did my own research. I'm not going to tell you every other caveat with every specific state because I want to talk about the most recent one, which was Tennessee. But I'll go through those states. And if you happen to be in those states, I implore you to look at the law to see specifically when, how individuals who are employed by school systems can actually carry concealed weapons because you'll be amazed at the number of states that have some kind of version that permit individuals to actually carry guns in the school. So before we move to Tennessee, I want to talk a little bit about the federal response to that. For those of you who don't know, some of you should know, there is a federal law that's actually entitled the Gun-Free School Zones Act. That act focuses on schools that are K through 12. So it does not focus on colleges or community colleges, four-year institutions, and things of that nature. But what the Gun-Free School Zone Act prohibits is it prohibits any person from knowingly, and that's an important piece, knowingly possessing a firearm that has moved in or otherwise affects interstate or foreign commerce. So in other words, that the person bought it and they have reason to believe that gun, that item had to come from some other place other than the place where they are, right? Interstate commerce. That's how federal government is able to enact laws that impact individuals at the local level because there are certain goods that can traverse state lines and then that can that has federal implications and therefore the federal law can apply there. But I digress. That's just a quick lesson for you all, but most of you probably already know that. But also, and it prohibits them from knowingly carrying that a firearm at a place the individual knows or has reasonable cause to believe is a school zone, right? Certainly if it says welcome to Peeps Creek Elementary, is more likely than not that individuals should recognize and understand that that is a school zone. However, maybe at a daycare that doesn't necessarily have any kind of, I don't know, educational curriculum, perhaps that will give reason to provide a person to not understand that that would be considered a school zone. But that all facts matter at that particular time. But that's just a kind of example. The problem with that, most people will look at that and say that should be sufficient, right? Mm, this Malbec is pretty good. I don't know if I'm gonna put that down. All right. But most people will hear that and say, okay, that should be sufficient. Why isn't that enough? Why isn't the federal government or the states actually pulling upon that particular legislation, that particular piece of law to go after individuals you know, who deal with, who engage with having firearms in or near a school zone? The problem with that is that when you actually read the legislation, there's loopholes, right? And the term loopholes, and let me be very clear because I'm going to try to be as unbiased as I can in this particular episode. I don't want to use the word loopholes, but I would say the exceptions. There are exceptions that are delineated within the statute. However, for those individuals who are proponents of better gun reform and not allowing individuals to carry guns on or around school grounds, they more likely than not will use the term loophole. So exception, loopholes, for purposes of this episode, we're going to use them interchangeably. All right. So what that does though is that first you need to understand what's considered a school zone. So a school zone is basically you can't be on or within 1,000 feet from a grounds of a public, parochial, or private school that provides elementary or secondary education. And for purposes of the statute, secondary education goes up through high school, so through 12th grade. However, the exception, aka loophole, for those other folks who like to use that term, it does not apply to a person licensed by a state or locality to possess a gun. So you have to understand what that means. That means that if I am authorized to have a gun in my state, let's just say state of, I don't know, Wyoming, mm, then because I am authorized to carry a gun, and if I carry a gun within 1,000 feet or on the school grounds of a public, parochial, private school, by definition of the statute or by reason of the statute, I would not be in violation because ding, 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 I'm licensed by a state or a locality to possess that particular gun. And or the other option is that the firearm, a person has a firearm, but the firearm is unloaded and then a locked container or a locked firearms rack on a motor vehicle. So let's say, hypothetically speaking, I am in, I don't know, Arkansas. I decide I want to pick up my son at school. I have a F-150. On the back of the F-150 there is a case there. I have some kind of rifle or some other kind of concealed weapon there, but it's unloaded and it's locked in some kind of container. Even though I'm technically on the grounds and or with 1,000 feet of a public, parochial, or private school, that particular statute, the Gun Free School Zones Act, would be inapplicable because I meet one of the exceptions. The other way is that the firearm is possessed for use in a school program that's approved by the school or in accordance with a contract that's entered into between the school and the individual and the employee of the individuals and the individual or an employee of the individual. So in this particular case, hypothetically speaking, let's say that I am in the state of Utah, right? And I happen to be a firearms instructor, and there is a um, course with the what are the people? I never did it because I always thought they looked stupid coming to school in their green uniform all day, every day with those black shiny shoes. ROTC, right? No offense to people in ROTC. It was just my personal preference. I didn't want to wear that green outfit all day with that stupid hat on. But anyway, but I was young and immature at the time when I was viewing that from the eyes of that. But anyhow, let's say I am an instructor and I get into the contract with a school in Utah to teach a particular defensive course for the ROTC program. And so I bring in guns, and I bring in three or four of my employees that assist with that, and they all carry concealed weapons. In that particular instance, because we are in a contract with a school and the other three to four individuals are employees of mine, then I would meet that exception. And so therefore, even though I'm on the grounds or within 1,000 feet of a public, parochial, or private school, I would meet the exception. And so therefore, the Guns Free School Zone Act would not be applicable to me, and I would not be in violation of that. So that's why the federal statute for many people failed to do what it needed to do necessarily, right? To protect individuals and to prevent guns on the school ground, right? Now, I should caveat this by saying that I don't think any particular law can 100% prevent anything, right? And I don't want to be, I don't know, cynical, but it's just the nature of the beast, right? Laws are on the book for most times for to serve as a deterrent, and also serve as a way to punish individuals when they violate or do something that is inconsistent with what the law requires or expects of that individual. We all heard of the concept of law-abiding citizens, right? Now, before I want to move to Tennessee, I want to kind of break down why I named this title "Protecting the Students of the Wild Wild West," right? So I use the word Wild Wild West for a particular reason before folks start sending messages, hey, you don't know what you're talking about, yeah, right? For purposes of this episode, that term Wild Wild West is used for two camps of individuals, right? So, for those of you who ever watched some of those old movies, cowboy movies, my grandma used to watch them all the time. Actually, I abhorred them because they were slow, they were stupid, and they were just riding around on horses and have rifles and start shooting at people and doing shit that I just thought was unrealistic. So I never really got into it, but I understood the whole concept of Wild Wild West, right? So there's one cap of individuals that use that term to refer to a situation where people are just lawless. They're just doing whatever the hell they want. Everyone is slinging guns, pulling guns out on folks, walking into the saloon or the saloon, and say, give me some of that bourbon." And when the bartender says $5, and I pull out my my six shooter, and I pew pew pew, right, start shooting, right? Wild Wild West, lawlessness. I'm able to just do what I want in that sense because I'm carrying a gun. I'm protecting myself and or cause havoc whenever I want. The other camp of individuals identify Wild Wild West to actually be the opposite. It is a sense of lawfulness. And the reality of is that because people are armed and because people understand folks are armed, folks are less likely to engage in improper behavior or engage in violent behavior. And so there are some individuals who believe that during the time, and I don't have any statistics to see what the crime rate was in comparison to what it is now, knowing that we have more of a larger population now than we did then. I'm not going to take the time in that because is my title, but I wanted you to understand what I meant by that. Those are the two camps of individuals, and I think that that fits perfectly and going into understanding and dissecting Tennessee's recent laws. For those of you who have not heard either on social media or through any kind of news, whatever news you use, Tennessee passed a bill, and in fact, the governor signed the bill on April the 26th, 2024. I am recording this on April the 29th, which is 3 days later. So 3 days ago, the governor of Tennessee passed a bill relating to the use of guns and having concealed weapons in the classrooms. That bill was introduced as Senate Bill 1325. I don't have the House bill, so for those of you who don't know how that works, typically one of the arms of the government, either the House or the Senate, will initiate the bill, go through their process, go through their amendments, and once they are ready and finished and finalized, then they will pass it to the other house to go through that same process. Once the two houses go through their process, then it's typically given to the individual. In this aspect, the governor, to make a decision on whether he's going to sign it into law or he's going to veto it, right? And in this particular instance, it was signed into law. So it started initially, it was initially introduced in the Senate in January of 2023, Tennessee Senate, January of 2023. That is Bill SB 1325. For those of you who are looking, I always think it's important to try to see these things. I am actually going to pull it up so you can see it with me and we can talk about it. I'm going to lay down my burden down by the river. Down by. All right. As you can see, that this is Senate Bill 1325. It was House Bill 1202, where it says by Bailey, by Williams. Those are the individuals who introduced the bill or who's taking responsibility for introducing the bills from both houses. Bailey is in the Senate for Tennessee, and Williams is in the House of Representatives for Tennessee. Anyhow, what this bill permits is that it permits a faculty, and we can go there right there. It permits a faculty or staff member employed at a school within an LEA, and that's a learning education agency. It allows those individuals in that category, faculty or staff member, to possess and carry a concealed handgun on the grounds of the school in which the person is assigned. It also permits a person assigned to a school within an LEA with a memorandum of understanding between the chief of the appropriate law enforcement agency and the LEA to carry a concealed weapon. In order for a faculty or staff member to carry concealed weapon, that faculty or staff member must be permitted to carry a gun by the state, not prohibited by law from doing so, and have the chief of the local law enforcement agency's permission. And that person must also complete a 40-hour course and basic training in school policing if that faculty or staff member wants to carry a concealed weapon. Now, remember, I indicated two separate categories of individuals who can fall under this statute. Faculty or staff members is one, and then the other is a person. So the individual who is considered a person, the difference between that and the requirements for the faculty and staff is that the person must have a written authorization from the LEA's director of schools in conjunction with the principal of the school at which the person is assigned, and that person must be a law enforcement officer or have prior law enforcement experience. They also must make sure that they do the 40 hours of training as well. So we have the faculty and staff who are able to carry a concealed weapon, assuming that they follow the requirements in order to do, and then the person, assuming that individual follow the requirements to do so with respect to carrying a gun on campus. Now, one of the pieces of this statute that I find a little alarming, right, is that who decides to carry a concealed weapon, whether it is a faculty staff member or a person, and they follow and they meet the requirements to carry, that person's identity is confidential and not subject to public inspection. Now, what does that mean? It assumes, I think, by looking at the statute, that the person who applies and wants to carry the concealed weapon, that person would know, of course. The chief of the local law enforcement would know. Obviously, the director for the LEA, and in some instances, particularly with the person, the principal of the school would know who that person is. But you as a student, if you're a student there, you can't just go and say, hey, I want to know who's carrying a gun. Parents can't go and say they want to know who's carrying a gun. Now, the reality is I didn't sit through the hearings, the debates with respect to this, and I don't know what the motivation behind that. But presumably, the motivation could be is that they don't want individuals to know in the unlikely event of some situation occurring where that person is automatically targeted to remove any kind of threat to the person who's trying to create a threat to the institution. So that plausibly, that's one reason. Another reason is that they don't want these individuals to be harmed in the sense of, and I'm not talking about necessarily violence, but they don't want to be submit those individuals to harassment and things of that nature by folks who disagree with the passage of the legislation. Again, I don't know the particulars as to why that piece is in there. I do think that is troubling and could have some negative connotations, particularly in the sense of not knowing who it is or who's carrying, right, could create a sense of necessary awareness from students and other faculty members and staff members of anticipating who may be carrying a gun, right? And so if you're always on edge, I think it's very difficult for a student to be able to concentrate on the work, particularly if they're concerned about some kind of inadvertent discharge of a gun, or worst case scenario, God forbid, the person who's authorized to carry a concealed weapon actually becomes the threat, right? Or and actually becomes the internal threat to students and other staff members and things of that nature. You know, unfortunately, people do weird things. A person can get into an argument with one particular teacher and get upset, and going back to the Wild Wild West theme, and decide, you know what, I'm not going to sit here and argue with you. I'm just going to take you out, right? It's unfortunate, and it's hopefully something that will not occur, but it's not out of the ordinary, right? We've seen social media posts where folks are in school and just out of random just start fighting teachers and teachers fighting kids. And it's not out of the realm of possibility that someone who's carrying a concealed weapon would take that out, maybe unconsciously, right? Because they're just used to this being a protective mechanism. And so now I need to protect myself in this situation, even though I'm protecting myself against someone who's actually in a school system. So that could create an issue. But for those individuals who are granted the right to carry a concealed weapon in school, according to the Tennessee law, cannot carry the gun openly, meaning you can't walk around brandishing the weapon in your classroom and down the hall going to the bathroom or in lunch, and you cannot allow it to be visible, right? So if you have it as a hoister your on your side, I guess you need to wear some kind of jacket or something that's going to conceal the fact that it is a weapon. Maybe put it in your boot. If you, going back to that Wild Wild West theme, you have some kind of cowboy boot, you want to put it down there. I don't know where you're going to put it though, so it's not seen. Lock it in a drawer in the classroom. I don't know, but it needs not be visible. You cannot carry it during gym or in stadiums or in auditoriums where student sponsored events are. That's here. Let me go down. Sorry. That's about the confidentiality for those who are looking. And then where I'm at, oh, right here. So stadiums, gymnasiums, you cannot have it in meetings regarding disciplinary matters. And I think that is important because if someone is in a heated situation, emotions fly, temperatures fly, people say things, mouths are moving, people getting on your nerves. It could turn into some kind of tragedy, right? So you can't have it in a disciplinary meeting. You cannot have it in meetings regarding tenure issues. And I think that's predominantly with respect to other teachers. If there's a concern about whether one person is granted tenure over another, there could be tensions high as a result of that. So you cannot use it there. You cannot have it in a hospital, clinic, or office where medical or mental health services are the primary services. And then you can't have it in any other location that's prohibited by state or federal law, right? So, for instance, most federal buildings, you can't have a gun, even if this law permits you to do so. If we were in the state of, I don't know, Tennessee, yeah, and I wanted to do a school trip with my kids to the capital, more likely than not, I'm not able, even though I'm authorized under the statute and I meet the requirements to carry a concealed weapon, I wouldn't be able to bring that weapon into perhaps the state hall because the state government probably would prohibit you from doing so, right? They prohibit you from bringing it in the state hall, but they'll allow you to bring it in the school room with your students. Now, another big piece of this legislation, which I thought was interesting, is that they give a sense of immunity to those individuals who actually carry concealed weapons. And I know in the news you probably heard about Trump saying he has absolute immunity for any act, whatever, right? So in this concept, it gives some sense of immunity for those individuals who are authorized to carry a concealed weapon on the school grounds, that it precludes a person from suing a faculty or staff member from events that arise solely from or that are related to, listen how broadly that is, solely from or related to a faculty or staff member's use of or failure to use a handgun, provided that the faculty or staff member is authorized to carry the handgun pursuant to this statute. So in this particular instance, let's say hypothetically speaking, there is some kind of threat from an external source, and I am one of the individuals who's authorized to have a concealed weapon on campus, and there's this threat, and I decide I'm not going to do anything with this to try to mitigate the threat. I'm just going to try to run away and save myself. In that instance, because I am an individual who's authorized to carry the concealed weapon under the guise of this particular statute, because I want to purportedly provide some kind of assurance or some kind of security for those who I work with and the students in which I are teaching or I have some relationship with. You can't sue me for failing to act against the threat that's coming. Likewise, if there is a firearm that's discharged and I'm discharging it towards the threat, but unfortunately I hit someone and maim that person. In that particular instance, according to the statute, I cannot be sued for any kind of damages with respect to that. Now, notably, it leaves out anything with respect to criminal. So there is no immunity, at least as it's written, with respect to criminal actions if I intentionally do something, to harm a person. But criminal is not the same as civil. So that means that criminal is the state or the locality actually taking upon the burden to take that person to court. But you as an individual, whether it's you who's harmed or family members that's harmed, you can't receive any damages as a result of that because of this particular statute. And interestingly enough, even though the immunity portion it says faculty and staff, when you go further down into the statute, that it identifies or it defines faculty or staff member as including all faculty, staff, and other persons who are employed on a full-time basis by the LEA. So remember in the very beginning of this, I talked about faculty, staff, that was one category, then persons, that was another category. So if that person who is authorized to carry a concealed gun is a full-time employee by the local education agency, then that person would be able to share immunity. If that person is a part-time, by definition, or at least by taking the statute for what it says, right? And the concept of statutory interpretation, you read it as it is intended. And if it's not there, the presumption is that it was not meant to be there. And so because the legislators expressly used the word full-time basis, then when you employ statutory interpretation in this particular instance, part-time individuals would not be protected by this portion of the immunity clause there with respect to actions that are that arise solely from or that are related to that person's use of or failure to use the handgun. And so this act is active immediately. It was signed on April the 26th. And because there is no waiting period by the statute, it is effective immediately in the state of Tennessee. For those of you who don't know, in Tennessee, in March 27, 2023, at a Covenant school in Nashville, Tennessee. And I want to pull this up for those of you who are watching, and maybe some of you will hear. This is a TikTok video that kind of shows, TikTok is beautiful. It gives you kind of these clips that you can quickly and effectively use. But anyhow, there's a TikTok clip. We go.
Silent surveillance footage shows the shooter driving into the Covenant School's parking lot in a Honda Fit around 9:53 a.m. You can see children on a playground in the background. Nearly 20 minutes later, the shooter fires through glass doors on the side of the building to gain entry.
Confirm active shooter.
Police say they received a call about an active shooter at 10:13 a.m. By that time, the surveillance video shows the shooter was already in a hallway inside the school. 5 minutes after that, opening a door to an office and then reemerging moments later.
I was hoping this day would never ever come here in this city, but we would never wait to make entry and to go in and to stop a threat, especially when it deals with our children.
When police arrived, the shooter was firing at responding officers from a window on the second floor. These images show where the bullets hit police car windshields. 14 minutes after receiving that 911 call, police say they killed the shooter.
So that event, March 27, 2023, which was at a private school, and it was school-age kids, right? So that in and of itself is enough to pull on the heartstrings of individuals in the community, and particularly parents, right? And so I'm speaking as a parent. I wouldn't know what the right response would be, right? Part of me wanted to say, if there was individuals, responsible individuals, and that's the key, you got to have responsible individuals there. If there was responsible individuals on campus who had a firearm, perhaps when that shooter attempted to come through those glass and shoot through the glass, and perhaps they could have taken out the threat a lot sooner, and therefore prevent the issues that occurred on that particular day. Another side of me is that I'm not sure that necessarily is the solution, because itself could cause a threat internally as well. If something happens inadvertently, let's say that a person is walking and whatever, they slip and somehow their firearm goes off. So as a parent, I think that it's difficult to juggle what the proper response is. Some individuals may feel safer, as people do, in their own home, right? Some folks have guns in their homes, not because they want to be violent towards people, but some have them as the protective mechanism. Some folks are just collectors. Some folks think that it is because it's in the Second Amendment that everyone needs to have it, and no one can do anything to make any kind of abridgment to that in any kind of form, shape, or fashion, which isn't true, right? We have government has somehow impeded many of our constitutional rights for the good of the public. So there's ways in which you can do that. But for whatever reason, right, some people may feel safer with a gun. Some parents may think, what would a SRO, and that's a school resource officer with a billy club, what can he do against a gun? And so for some folks, it's necessary for those type of individuals who have some kind of training. Purportedly, many of them are previous law enforcement officials, or, as I've stated earlier at the beginning of this episode, have served part-time, right? So some folks may think that those are the right individuals to do it. However, some folks think that regular teachers, staff members who actively engage in gun safety, actively go to the shooting range, have taken courses on the proper aspect of dealing with guns, particularly, around family, and the fact that they may have their own family where they have these guns at home and they take safety precautions. Some may think it's the right thing to do. I don't know. It's difficult, right? But what I can say is that as it relates to Tennessee, there was quite a big bit of backlash about the proper response to this. And I want to show some of this. And again, we're going to go to our friend on TikTok, where we began to see some of the discussions relating to this. And out of full disclaimer, this is from The Independent. The previous video you saw or heard was from CBS Mornings on TikTok, and I'm just using this for purposes of discussion, not to take their information. All right.
There are children alive today that would be dead because of your attitudes.
You know any teachers? They don't get paid to you met these people, they shouldn't have guns. Former teacher, I would never carry a gun to school. And I know how to use a gun and I own it. I would never carry a gun in front of my students. I loved my students. I would die for them, but I would not shoot them.
So that was in early April of 2023. Remember, I said that the initial bill was initiated in January, and it kind of took on its own a life of its own after the March 27th shooting. Again, I am not from Tennessee, although my family lineage from Martin, Tennessee, which is a small little town in that area. I went there to do some family research on my history. But here's another video, and this is from the Tennessee Senate Dems
This is irresponsible.
TikTok.
The public school teachers don't even want the bill. They're not even asking you for this.
No.
We just passed legislation to have SROs in every school. Can we see if that works yet?
Not that baby swinging
I'm
through that
upset,
girl.
not out of because I don't like
She's
you
carrying
all
a baby.
individually, because I'm mad because this bill puts my child at risk. And all the mothers out here that just got put out,
This
they're
is Senator
saying their
London
children at
Lamar.
risk. Look at that gallery.
Memphis
They're
District
asking you not
33.
to do this. Put partisan politics aside. I ask you this all the time, but this bill is dangerous. Don't do it.
Period. All right, so that's one response in regards to the debate related to this bill. This is pretty fun doing this by myself. I forgot how much fun I have in talking to this. All right, and then this is from NC5 Nashville, their Twitter account. They are showing us some action over here. Let's go there and take a TikTok. Lawmakers passed
Their blood is on your hands.
and these are students, a lot of students who are
If there's
protesting.
any Covenant parents in the gallery today,
And remember,
I wanna
Covenant
apologize to you right now.
is
We're gonna throw more guns at
the situation occurred on March
That is not
27th.
going to solve the problem. It's going to create more deaths.
State troopers, please clear the gallery on both sides.
I trust my local law enforcement. I trust my director of schools. I trust my teacher. If they believe this is what's right for that specific community and it's permissive and they think that's going to help take care of my child, I fully support this.
Vast majority of teachers and parents do not want this legislation. Absolutely do not want it.
I'm tired of coming here. I'm tired of going to gun rallies. I'm tired of going to memorials, people who were killed by gun violence. I'm so tired of these tragedies because the people we elect consistently do nothing.
So I thought when I was going through to try to see what it is that I wanted to show, I thought that it was important to highlight some of the students, because the reality is that I think as lawmakers, I'm not a lawmaker, but I just, in my own times of protesting and going out and, for instance, the Black Lives Matter movement and having conversations and protesting, because there were a lot of young folks there, I think that lawmakers tend to discount and disregard their opinions, their thought process. But the important, I think, and here's what I want to say with that, is that as a lawmaker, you serve all the folks that are particularly within your district, right? And that includes those who vote, but that also should include the folks who cannot vote. Because oftentimes what happens is that the people who are voting based upon what they feel is most beneficial for themselves, but also for the family members. But more importantly here is that the impact of this statute does not affect parents as much as it does affect children. And that's because the parents are not in the classroom every day with the kids. They may drop them off. Some may sit around. Some may volunteer. Some may come in and go to lunch, and some may serve lunch. Some may come in and bring birthday cupcakes in for the kids, for the other kids. But the reality is that they're not in there day in and day out with respect to the school period. And so if in fact, and I don't know, because I wasn't there and I didn't do enough research to determine or do a survey to determine how many students impacted by the statute actually support it. But I think that if the Tennessee legislators failed to do that, I think that they did an injustice to the state of Tennessee. I think they did an injustice to the individuals who are impacted by that, particularly those who are old enough to voice their opinion. Maybe individuals who 3 or 4 cannot voice their opinions. But I think that individuals who are protesting, and you've heard some of that for those of you who didn't see the video, but those of you who saw the video, you saw that students were actually protesting this. I think it's incumbent upon state legislators, when they are trying to pass these types of bill, rightly or wrongly, right? In their head, they may think they're doing the right thing. But I do think it's incumbent upon them to take into consideration the thought processes, the perspectives of individuals. And here is one from the news movement. And this particular Senator, I think he's in the House, but I don't remember if he's in the House or the Senate for Tennessee. But he was censored, one of the black legislators who was censored in Tennessee for whatever reason. You probably heard about that on social media and saw it on the news a lot. But here's what he had to say.
Morally insane, and we've come to this chamber for a year expecting you to pass common sense gun laws. You have mothers and grandmothers here dragged from this chamber every week saying arm teachers with the books they need, the materials they need, the resources they need. But for God's sake, you don't hear them. What you're doing today is you're going to put guns in our schools for our teachers, and you should be ashamed of yourself.
Blood on your hands! Blood on your hands! Blood on your hands! Blood on your hands! Out! Vote them out! Vote them out! Vote them out! Blood on your hands! Blood on your hands! Blood on your hands!
And I would say that it behooves me that legislators feel and act as if they are bothered by the fact that people are protesting. They're bothered by the people, bothered by the fact that there is dissonance in regards to what they're trying to pass as what they think to be common sense legislation, particularly given the fact that one of the founding principles, I think, is the right to assemble, right? Now, granted, peacefully, things of that nature, right? And as long as there is not an attempt to create threats and other things, cause harm to individuals, you do have a right to assemble. And so it really baffles me when the legislators feel bothered or appear as if they're being inconvenienced by the fact that the individual has an opinion that's inconsistent with what the majority of that legislatures are doing. And this whole concept of dragging people out of the gallery because it's disruptive, it's just complete bullshit. It's disruptive to you because it's not consistent with the marching orders in which you are trying to do, right? Particularly the majority of the folks who want to pass a piece of legislation and take this legislation out, put in anything, right? Put on any type of legislation. When there is dissonance, I think that it is incumbent upon individuals who are voted in to serve as senators or representatives, it's incumbent upon them to hear the dissonance, right? They don't have to agree, but I think that it's important to hear it so that they can make an informed decision, right? And what I strongly believe is a lot of these folks are not making informed decisions. A lot of these decisions are based upon the conversation they have at home, conversations they may be having at church, conversation they may be having behind the scenes at a bar with one of their buddies that they work with. That is not the opinion of the people who you serve. And so it would be interesting to see what type of surveys were done as a mechanism to understand exactly how people really felt about the legislation. So anyhow, I don't want to belabor this too much because I've been going on and on and on. And of course, I have other videos to show, but I'm not going to show them. But as promised earlier, I want to make sure that I make this very clear that the only reason I'm talking about Tennessee is because it just passed 3 days ago. And so it's relevant and it's something that I wanted to talk about, and it's something that I did sufficient research on once it was passed so I can truly understand what was going on, even though I didn't read all the legislative history. I'm not going to do that, not for this episode. But certainly I encourage you out there who are listening, whether you agree with me or you disagree, if there's something that you think that I misspoke on or you think that I need to be more informed on, I welcome you to provide that information because that creates the opportunity for positive and important discourse. And I think that discourse is necessary in order for there to be any kind of pivot or any kind of change or any kind of move of the needle. Ooh, I should be running for some kind of office, shouldn't I? I should be a politician. New lifestyle. All right. So here are the states that in some form, shape, or fashion, remember, that is the caveat, some form, shape, or fashion permits guns to be carried on the school grounds by security, teachers, and or staff. It may be all of them. It may be one. It may be some with some kind of restrictions. These are the states in some form, shape, or fashion. And if you live in the state that I'm calling out, I encourage you to go and look at the legislation so that you can understand when, how, or why individuals who falls in this category are able to carry guns. And I'm not talking about other folks. I'm just talking about the folks who fall into the category of security, teachers, and or staff. It is Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, California, Colorado, Connecticut, Florida, Georgia, Hawaii, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, my hometown, my home state, Minnesota, Mississippi, Missouri, Montana, Nevada, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New Mexico, my alma mater from my law school, New York. Well, I like to go and shop, baby. North Dakota, Ohio, Oklahoma, Oregon, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, and Wyoming. So all of those states in some form, shape, or fashion permit a person who is a security, faculty, or staff member to actually carry some kind of firearm. So I implore you to go and look at that to see exactly what are the reasons that they permit individuals to carry guns in the state if you live in that particular state. So for those of you who are listening, I appreciate you. For those who are looking, I appreciate you. You know, I have more listeners than lookers, but y'all need to come look. Look at this face. The fuck? The fuck? Look at that smile. All right. So that is episode 89. Episode 89 is Protecting the Students or the Wild Wild West. I hope you enjoyed this kind of conversation. I am your host, Sean. Boom. Look at that. Ow. And you can reach us on Facebook. That you can watch our videos on there as well at Peach Creek Cafe. You can get us on IG, Twitter, aka X, or Twitch. I can never say X because it just sounds so stupid. I'm thinking of like the iPhone 10 when they had X and people were saying initially iPhone X, but then Apple had to come out and say technically it's Roman numeral, so it's iPhone 10. All right. So anyhow, IG, Twitter, or Twitch. You can look us up on YouTube at Peeps Creek Podcast, and you can go and listen to all of our episodes on our website and watch our videos, as well as have the transcriptions from each episode at peepscreek.com. You also can go in there. It has all the links for how you can subscribe to us through the various platforms that we're available. You can also get the RSS if you have some kind of system that you like to use for purposes of pooling. And you can send us an email. As I said, if there's something that you think that I misspoke on, I'm okay to hear feedback. Feedback could be positive or negative. I'm okay with that. Just note that if you disrespect, I'm going to clap right back. Period. Point blank. Period. The end. The fuck. All right. It is cafe@peepscreek.com. You are free to use that. As always, it is a joy to sit behind this mic. It is one of my most favorite things to do. I have not done it in a while. I've allowed other things to get in the way, but I am going to get back to doing the things that make me happy, and this is one of them. And so I appreciate the time, energy, and effort for those of you who listen. Those who don't, it's perfectly fine, but pass it along. You know, we be having some good conversations on here, and we take our time and try to actually get stuff so we can have some kind of meaningful discussion, even if you don't agree with it. But yeah, again, I'm Sean. Until next time, make sure that you continue to what? Drink, listen, and converse. Peace and love.